Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm actually not a VC anymore. I went back to being an entrepreneur now, so one correction on that. But let me introduce the panel. We're going to do it real quick. Fabian Siegel from Global Founders Fund, and Kevin Hartz from Eventbrite. I'm sure you guys can all Google them. I'm not going to do long introductions. The panel, what we're going to talk about, Go Big or Go Home, is actually a focus on going global. So what I want to talk to these guys about is their experiences in taking their businesses or their funds international, and what kind of problems they've seen doing that. So I'm going to try and just do a Q&A. Feel free to answer as long as you want, but keep it short. So Kevin, I'm going to start with you. You guys, I'm sure, are internationalizing. Why didn't we use Eventbrite to book this?
Well, thanks first for having me here. Very excited to speak. And let me first tell you what Eventbrite is. Eventbrite is a ticketing platform, but ticketing in the sense that we cover many different categories of ticketing, from conferences to sports to music to a whole range that you wouldn't imagine before. And we've gained a lot of momentum in the self-service side of ticketing. So that's where we've gained ground. Now, Next here is using a competitor of ours called Amiando that has been in the market for a few years, and perhaps someday we'll see if we can change that.
So how much of a problem when you internationalize is meeting all these local copycats? How much does that affect your internationalization strategy?
Well, first, I have to bring it back to Silicon Valley. And the challenge of what's happened in Silicon Valley over the last 10 years is that entrepreneurs and investors in Silicon Valley are too Silicon Valley centric. And what happened while we were all asleep in the valley is that the world economies, the internet really exploded overseas. And there's just not that centricity towards expanding globally. We've from day one, when we started Eventbrite in 2006, have been looking all around the world and trying not to see ourselves as a U.S. company, but see ourselves as a global company, and think in terms of how we can expand globally.
Great. Fabian, for you, the same kind of question from the fund perspective. How do you guys plan on being competitive internationally? There's plenty of large funds. You guys have a strong brand, but how do you really want to internationalize? What are you doing differently?
Well, I think running a fund or internationalizing a fund is not really a problem compared to internationalizing a business. A business, you have to build up operations and build up teams, understand the markets. Mm-hmm. Running a fund is much easier in a way globally because there's Skype, and with Skype you can speak to anybody in the world, and you can source deals. I think, especially for a fund, there's a big opportunity internationally because there's very little competition in certain geographies. So we don't see a lot of competition in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. So Europe and the US is very crowded, but I think there's an opportunity to have a fund that can invest globally and that is as well backed by people that have built global businesses. And that's what we at Global Founders Capital, we always try to say, it's a fund by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And all of us, all the partners in the fund, we have built global businesses, so we can try. We try to help our portfolio companies to take that knowledge, so that they can do the internationalization that they should do actually from day one.
And then as a fund, most of the time, I remember from my VC days, it was a lot about the people and really being close to the entrepreneur while being an investor. In terms of your structure, we were talking about this bit backstage, that you guys are a very small, lean team. How do you plan on addressing these geographies like Southeast Asia or Africa or maybe South America being such a small team? Is it a matter of doing a lot of Skype calls, or do you plan on spending a lot of time in these regions?
If I learned one thing about my last business that I built, which is a company called Global Delivery Hero, which is a global online food ordering platform, is like if you speak to people over the phone, you can actually be much closer than when you meet them in person because you just have more time to spend with people. So at my last business, we acquired 34,000 restaurants around the world, and we never met them in person, but we were very close to them because we speak to them on a monthly basis. So you can take that as well to my new business that I'm building here. So I'm seeing the fund as a business that we're building. And I feel like I can spend much more time with the entrepreneurs, talking to them. And sometimes you got to fly to this one or the other spot. I try not to do that and just spend the time over the phone with them, and that works very well so far.
Okay. Kevin, different question, which a lot of the entrepreneurs might be interested in hearing. When did you decide it was time to go beyond your local area. I mean, we were talking about this as well, that in the US, you can spend a lot of time addressing the US market before you have to worry about going international. In Europe, we might have that a little bit earlier. When did you decide now is the time to do it, and why?
Well, we looked at just the nature of what our customers were doing, and we had created a platform that's very simple to publish and start selling tickets, and that translated across geographies. So right out the gates, at the early stage of our business, and we were all an English language website at the time, we were seeing growth in the UK, we were seeing fantastic growth in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, so US speaking countries, and that was indicative of a business that translates in the sense that it's a universal business. So once we saw in today, London, for example, is our sometimes second, sometimes third largest city, depending on the week, in terms of gross ticket sales for that city. That's very informative of a global business, and that's very informative that we need to move quickly and move internationally.
I know you don't disclose your revenues, but in terms of the opportunity, how big is your global market, and how much of it is US and the rest of the world?
Well, today, this year we'll transact close to $1 billion in what we call gross ticket sales. We measure our business on behalf of how much we enable our customers, how much that they're selling and how much they're benefiting. And if I look, we were talking backstage at a company like eBay. eBay sells $66 billion, or will sell $66 billion in gross merchandise value this year, and we see a target like that is where we want to be in terms of these live experiences, powering every type of conference, sporting race, every type of seminar, class, and so on.
And are the markets that you're going into, so Europe is fairly clear, but other markets outside of Europe, are they ready for this opportunity? Are people buying tickets online?
We've sold tickets. We've had events held in 179 different countries.
Wow.
So it really is universal in Asia, in sub-Saharan Africa, and that's a very exciting phenomenon. I mean, the essence of our business, and you need to, as startup entrepreneurs, you need to look at your business, and when you really want to think big with your business, but our business is around bringing people together around a live experience. It could be music, it could be business and professional, but that is a universal aspect in something that we think is a massive opportunity.
Cool. Fabian, along those lines, what are the things that you're looking for or at when looking at international opportunities? What makes something an international or global opportunity versus just a local opportunity?
Right. I mean, what you try to understand is what is the problem that the venture is solving, and if that's a universal problem, a very basic problem. I personally like basic problems to be solved. I like problems that touch the real world, because the real world is so much bigger still than online-only businesses. When you find this kind of need, normally this is a global need, and what I always encourage the companies that we work with or that we talk to is to just test what's the demand globally, because it's very easy these days. You can run a global SEM campaign, and then you see immediately where there's interest, and you can see where there's traction. So I always say, when somebody starts a business, think international, build an English team, and test whether this opportunity, this business could work potentially everywhere in the world. And Google is your friend here. It allows you within a couple of weeks to figure out where there is business potentially.
Is there a difference when trying to launch a business where you want to scale internationally from day one, or you want to approach an international opportunity? Is it a different type of financing? Do you guys have to come in and put 10 million into a company versus putting $1 million in? Or is it business as usual in the venture world, where if everything is considered to be international from day one, you always fund everything similarly?
Well, I always have it's quite interesting when you talk to entrepreneurs, you often see the way of thinking and say, look, we raised $1 million or $2 million, what can we do with that money? I think it's a wrong way to think at it. You have to basically think the other way around. You have to think, is it a good business? What does it cost to acquire a customer or to acquire a business? What's the revenue that I generate from the business? And how much money do I need if I scale as fast as possible, given a certain amount I'm willing to pay? And that tells you in return how much money you'll need over time of the business. And then you have to always work backwards and say, okay, first I put in $1 million, and $1 million I can test the data, I can test the business plan until to that point, and then I can raise the next round of funding. So I always say, just assume there's unlimited amount of capital, because if you've got business that's investable, there is unlimited amount of capital that wants to go in. So that tells you when to raise what round of funding. Unlikely you're going to raise 10 million at your first round. Doesn't make so much sense because you want to get the data, and to data these days it's not expensive to get to data. It's $1 million, $500,000, and you have the first data, and then you always work backwards to when your next round will be, and what do you have to show for that round.
And how do you then convince the entrepreneur or the founders that you're talking to take your money? I mean, there's a lot of funds out there. The best teams are very competitive rounds, and you have an index showing up, you'll have an Axel showing up, you might have Sequoia, they're traveling a lot, the VCs are getting out of the valley. How do you differentiate yourself?
So that's a good question, because when we started, the Global Founders Capital is a very young fund. We're 6 weeks old. And we already did 4 deals in these 6 weeks, so we are very active, and we want to be very active going forward. So we thought, why do that? What's the edge? And I think our edge that we bring to the team is that we say we are a fund by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. So we always say we're not bankers or VCs, we are operators. So we don't take board seats, for example. We're not interested in board seats. We don't interested in months of KPI reporting. We like to work with the entrepreneur operationally and see how can we help you, how can you use our network, how can we use our experience to build your business. And we've gotten great feedback, because I think most entrepreneurs, that's what they're looking for, somebody who's done it before and who can guide them a little bit in what to do and maybe what not to do. And so I see that this is the advantage that we bring to the table. We're very pragmatic, entrepreneurial, and very fast.
Kevin, you were quoted in a Wired article I see here. It was where you basically said that as an angel investor that it's kind of gotten so hot and heated in the valley that there might be just too much money and too few opportunities. How much has that forced you to think internationally as a private investor? I mean, are you considering deals as an angel outside of the local regions?
Well, so the article was basically reporting that I had close to 6 or 8 months ago stopped, or close to a year now, had stopped angel investing entirely at the early stages, and investing in building companies is there's a cyclicality in investment. And what's happened in the valley, it's become very frothy, or it's become quite competitive. So you see a dozen of the same type of companies popping up. I like to invest. You asked the question before, how do you compete with an Excel or a Sequoia or so on, and I really like to be the first money into a company, and so that's what I like to do is invest where people are not investing. If I had the time, now I'm extremely focused on Eventbrite. I would be investing in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa and all these very exciting new opportunities. You always want to be where the herd is not, and that's where the opportunities are.
You said you were the first money in, or the first investor in PayPal. I bet at that point it wasn't really an international opportunity. Is that something you actually think about when you're putting money in, like into a team, or are you just saying, hey, these are a bunch of good guys, they'll figure it out?
I focus heavily on team and scale of market. So PayPal was, I had the opportunity to invest early, and Peter Thiel and Max Levchin were very special entrepreneurs, and it was very informative of how I was to invest later on. And I was a seed investor in Airbnb, a seed investor in Pinterest, before all the venture money came in. And what I look for in these cases are these extraordinary entrepreneurs that are fiercely independent, fiercely bright, and very aggressive, and that's been the formula. Just by default these days, if an entrepreneur has a U.S.-centric view of what they're doing, it's almost it's certainly a negative aspect that they're really not thinking global. If you're tapping into just the 300 million people in the U.S., you're leaving alone the 6.5 billion people worldwide, and that's what I carry in my operation. What I think about in my operation at Eventbrite is the massive opportunity worldwide.
In terms of, so Fabian, for you, in terms of your investment strategy, what is the point that you guys want to be invested in a business? Do you want them to be international when you find them, or do you want to take them international and help them do it right?
So I think our sweet spot is a team that has an international vision, or has a business that can be rolled out internationally, but hasn't done it yet, because we like to go in early as well. So we say we're stage agnostic, and we do write checks from 100,000 to 10 million, but we're not doing the late stage growth game. So traditionally, we like to see teams that are testing internationally, just starting to roll something out. And it's quite interesting that still today, many US companies, as you said, are still focusing too much on the US and leaving all the rest of the world as an open space. And that's why we see so much opportunity and so many companies that are actually going to these markets and building these business models. So we like businesses that are big businesses, that are, we don't like niche businesses, because it's much harder, much more risk, the way we see it, to build and exit such a business.
All right, so let's talk war stories. You guys are both entrepreneurs. You were also at Delivery Hero before. What was the biggest screw up that you had doing something internationally?
So I think the hardest thing when you roll something out internationally is to realize that not every market works. So some of these markets will not work, but sometimes when you're too much in love with actually building rolling your business out to all these markets, you're putting all your effort on this one market that doesn't work out. So you waste a lot of time. And the hardest thing is to close down actually a market doesn't work. So I'm always encouraging, part of rolling something out globally is shutting things down that don't work. And that's the hardest thing to do. So that was probably our biggest challenge, and is that we waited too long for one market, Delivery, to shut it down.
Okay. Kevin, what about you guys? What do you guys screwed up?
Well, we've screwed up a lot of things, but
Pick one.
But the reality is that you learn a lot from that, and the best companies are ones that will always make mistakes, but just move on, learn from them, and move on. But in general, I mean, I'll focus on the positive side. Is we do a lot of benchmarking. Entrepreneurs should think about when you're entering, when you're going into the global market, you'll actually see you'll see certain markets will actually outperform some of your earlier markets. So we look a lot at the U.S. and we look back to the beginning of when we launched in the U.S. and we look at the growth curve. You know, we normalize that by revenue per internet user, and then we can compare that to Germany, UK, France, Ireland. Indonesia, any country, and we can see the growth that's happening along there, and then we can reverse engineer and figure out what we need to do. Do we really have a good translation or a good localization of the site? Do we have the right payment mechanisms that serve that market? Do we have the right people that really understand the culture of that? And as we correct those, we do. I mean, I can't tell you some of the horror stories we've had in just mistranslating, comical things in a comical fashion that people don't understand. We continue to make these mistakes, but when you correct them, you see the growth that derives from it.
Maybe to that, I think that's a very good point, that I believe, in my experience, businesses tend to be very similar, even though the regions are very different. So when you run a business, the KPIs, like the user behavior, the cohorts, tend to look similar in Germany, in Korea, in Australia, and the US. They tend to look similar. So if they don't, that's a good point. You have to figure out either the market is fundamentally broken for your business, or you're doing something wrong. So don't expect things to be very, very different. And you'll be surprised how similar actually certain core behaviors in your business model are when you roll them out globally.
What are markets you guys wouldn't go into? Are there markets where you just say, God forbid I go there?
So one market I personally would be careful, because I just don't understand it very well, is China. I think it's very difficult to invest in China and to take value out of China. But there are people that are doing very successful businesses there, but they know how to do it. I'm not one of them. So that's a market I would stay away from.
I would answer exactly the same way. We took a close look at China and chose not to move into that market. We feel that we can win in the rest of the world and seed China and still be an extremely successful company. But moving into China is almost binary and separate from the rest of the world. And so to us, it's this question mark, and we've left it alone for now.
Okay. How are you going to measure being successful internationally? I mean, what is for you guys the goal? Is it we're going to IPO, or is it we're going to have a sustainable business? I mean, where do you kind of see it going with Eventbrite?
Well, an IPO is as we all know, is just a financing milestone. We just raised another 60 million, with a lot of that dedicated to really building up the German market, building up other international great markets, and for us, we measure that in terms of gross ticket sales. So we'll do $1 billion this year. How fast can we get to 10 billion? How fast can we get to 50 billion? That's the measure for success. We have no exit strategy in mind. We have no end goal or end date or goal in mind. There's always building ahead of us. Our market has many different categories of these events and ticketing in many different geographies, and it will be a lifetime of work for us. Think about where Amazon started in 1995 in selling books and where it is today, and how much more growth it has in it, unless of course some of your companies take it out. But we have a lot of work ahead of us.
What about with the fund? I mean, you're only 6 weeks old at this point. It seems to be an evolution of, let's say it's an evolution of the Zumber Brothers strategy. Where is this all going? I mean, where's the fund headed? And are you guys trying to build a bank, or what's the long-term goal?
So we believe that we are just seeing the beginning of e-commerce. So we're very bullish in terms of the next 20 years. So we really just believe it's just the beginning. I think only 5% of retail have moved online, or some 5 to 10% depending on the vertical. And we believe it's going to be 50%, maybe even more. So we're just seeing the beginning, and this is a global phenomenon. It's just not something that's happening in the US or in Europe. So it's the same here. We don't have an end goal where we want to be in 10 years, but we want to participate in every big business globally that will be built by this behavioral switch of society that's doing more and more online, anytime, anywhere, and so that's what we're going to do.
Very German-specific question for you. You blogged that after you left Delivery Hero that Germany has the culture of envy, which had negatively influenced you. You're still here though. Why not leave and go work out of San Francisco or go be elsewhere?
Well, I've got a family, I've got a wife, she just started a PhD, okay. So I got to stick around a bit longer here. But
invest global, live local.
So it does, I think professionally it doesn't matter where you are. Professionally you can be anywhere where you want. In the end it's a personal choice where you want to live. I think Berlin is a great place to build an international business because you've got access to talent. So professionally it's a very good place. US is a great place to build big businesses. So I think there's nothing wrong with Berlin in terms of building professional business. Whether you personally like it, it's a personal choice. No? And I'm still here.
When it comes to the global markets, you guys said you wouldn't go into China, but we also hear a lot about China, about what's going on there. What do you guys think are the kind of the hidden champs? I mean, to both of you the question, where are people not focusing when they should be focusing?
I think one market is Indonesia, no? One of the largest markets in the world, growing rapidly, big middle class developing, that's one of the things. Another market is Kenya. Nigeria, huge markets, middle class developing. We always see Africa as still this complex of a continent needing for help. What we don't see is that there's actually a big middle class developing, and there's a lot of purchasing power in these markets. So people not really identifying them yet.
So if a founder comes to you and says he's got an Indonesia or Africa strategy, is that a benefit for you to invest? Or is it secondary? Is it first team? Or do you say, okay, that geography, we want to have something in that geography, let's go do that?
For us, it's first business model, then team, and then geographic footprint.
And Kevin, what about you? Where do you think people should be?
Well, when I get back from Berlin next week, I'm off to Latin America. It's no secret. There's a lot of great companies, Mercado Libre and Netshoes. There's already a lot of clear winners in there, but it's a really intriguing market. If I was on the investment side, I love some of these emerging markets. That you talk about, Indonesia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And I think it also raises something very important, is that you want to be involved in businesses, involved in geographies that almost make investors uncomfortable. Every business that I found, every investment that I've done, and when I've started businesses, it's always made investors uncomfortable. It's contrarian, I guess, is the word I'm seeking, is that you want to do something that, again, there's this herd mentality in Silicon Valley and in investors and even entrepreneurs, and you want to be moving in a different direction and seeing the opportunities far ahead. And so you want to be looking at whether it's a particular market that people wouldn't think would exist or would be sustainable, or a geography.
Do you think a lot of people are overlooking segments internationally? So you said you're focusing on the e-commerce opportunity because there's still so much growth available, but there's so many other things that might even be more successful in other geographies. Is that an opportunity that's also being overlooked?
I personally am always skeptical of doing things too early. Because even though you're convinced this will be a big business, you never know whether when the time arrives or when the future arrives. As I have an experience in my own past, as I co-founded a company called Click and Buy, which is a payment system here in Germany. We started in 2000, and we were 6 years too early. So we were lucky to survive, but we barely made it. So therefore, there will be the next big thing. It's just I'm not the person to understand when that will happen, and therefore I'll wait.
But you've been doing a lot of really early stage stuff. I mean, Airbnb, PayPal, these were all kind of industry-changing plays. What are you seeing?
Typically, there's a confluence of events that happen. You know, some very obvious seismic shifts that we've seen over the last few years are the impact of social in the ecosystem of companies that it's created on a global basis, the impact of big data in the markets and opportunities that it has opened up, the iOS and Android markets of all the companies in global reach that it's given developers and these new opportunities. So you do want to be looking out for what are these seismic shifts, what are these new technologies or changes in the market. I love the example of YouTube launching, which is another PayPal Mafia derivative company. The three founders all came from PayPal, and they started at a period where broadband had just hit kind of mass penetration, where embeddable flash was available, where social media was beginning to be this distribution piece, and that was the right timing to see that hypergrowth. So you want to be very observant as an entrepreneur and see what those shifts are in the market. And we do that all the time. We apply that at Eventbrite, because if you don't apply it, you end up being disrupted by somebody else.
Well, on that note, Fabian, Kevin, thank you. We're out of time. I didn't take any questions, but I'm sure you guys could find these guys here on the floor. So give a round of applause. Thank you.